So let's move to the next paper. Thank you. That was really good. NASA's EM, electromagnetic drive thrust from the forces of the quantum vacuum of space-time. Building on the various manifestations of the forces latent in the quantum vacuum of space-time, such as Hawking's radiation and Unruh temperature, we resolve a major paradox connected to an immensely important proposal by NASA scientists for constructing a practically fuelless spacecraft. In a nutshell, preliminary laboratory work shows that NASA's electromagnetic drive project is viable, and several experiments and measurements show it is real. Yet the proposal violates a fundamental principle of classical mechanics, namely Newton's third law. The resolution of this paradox is quite straightforward in principle. It is simply the case that although the proposal seems to be based on classical mechanics and classical thinking, it is only superficially so. Deep at the roots, the electromagnetic drive proposal of NASA is not classical physics, but rather based on the vacuum forces of quantum cosmology and the theory of dark energy density of the universe. In fact, the proposal is deeply linked to Hawking's radiation and Unruh temperature, which is explained in some detail in the main body of the present short paper within the framework of E-infinity Cantorian spacetime theory and de Gross's heterotic superstring theory. In short, the quintessence of our explanation is to regard the electromagnetic drive as a quasi-electromagnetic cavity with an effective event horizon akin to that of a Hawking black hole, emitting radiation causing ultimately the needed thrust to push the spacecraft forwards. In addition, and by invoking fractal space-time self-similarity, we show that a spacecraft will be subject to another cosmic thrust on the large scale of the entire cosmos.
Yeah. A lot of words here which are very specialized, but I want to give you first a historical background, second my own background, and finally a simple explanation for what is meant here. First, for the sake of honesty, I never thought about this thing, nor wanted to think about it. I have a friend in Iraq, of all the places in Iraq. He worked in Baghdad, and he is a well-known university there, and he is a very senior professor, and I know him before Iraq collapsed in the chaos which it collapsed into, and the incredible situation in which they live even this moment in Baghdad. Mission accomplished, and nothing was accomplished really. This Professor Habib, Mohamed Habib, he called me and he told me about NASA have made something which can work without fuel, a rocket, and everybody's attacking NASA and say this is impossible and this is nonsense. NASA, a lot of people defend NASA defending themselves. And I don't think anybody can clear this except you. He calling me from Baghdad. I'm living here in the peace and quiet and harmony of Europe, and he is calling me on his account to tell me that, and he's living, to be honest, in hell as far as I'm concerned. I could not call anybody if I would be living where he is, but he is working and researching and thinking. No, I said, I have no time for that. Professor Habib, just leave me in peace. He called me again, and he called me again and again. Then suddenly I found a reason why I should do that. I would like to prove that NASA is wrong. Now, why I am so vicious want to prove that NASA is wrong. First, I joined the crowd for once in my life, to be on the side of the stronger. But there was another political thing, really. We have an Egyptian who was claiming to work for NASA, and he always wanted to be president of Egypt and attacking our president in order to take over. And I really couldn't stand this person. So, being a human, very tiny mind human, I followed my emotion impulse. I can now prove this. NASA, with which he's decorating himself wrong, so we get rid of this guy who wants to be our president by force because he works in NASA. A lot of these things happen nowadays in the Middle East. So I started looking into the subject. And I found that long before NASA, a British engineer in aerospace, British aerospace, working there, he came with this proposal of a motor, which he called electromagnetic drive, which somehow doesn't need any fuel and takes the rocket and you can travel to the end of the universe. And nobody believed him for years and years and years and years. They had some experiment and measurement and something like that. Then suddenly, many years later, after he was totally discouraged, is Roger Shawyer. Roger Shawyer was the engineer who found that, British engineer. Not a professor, nothing. A man with imagination and drive. To say something like that is not easy because you will be called crackpot immediately. And then NASA took over this and said yes. Not only that, a little bit after NASA, the Chinese declared that they already not only say it's correct, they have done it already. And there was claim and counterclaim. The whole thing became really, it's filling the internet with papers and published in obscure journal, paper published in good journal. Then I said, okay, I will put my head into that. If they are talking about space-time, I know what's space-time. To make a long story short, it turned out they are right. NASA is right. So I set on to prove NASA to be wrong in order to take revenge, of politically motivated to take revenge. Then I found they are right. But right for completely different reason. But the proof of the pudding in the eating, and so we will have a rocket which can do that. And then I wrote this paper you just mentioned and realized how it is related to Hawking radiation and on-route temperature and all these fundamentals in physics is basically, again, more or less what they have measured really, because they never had a motor taking a rocket outside. It was a motor standing there and they making some measurement about thrust, something, a force, a minute thrust. Actually, to put it in a very simplistic word, they're measuring really more or less a form of a Casimir effect. And the Casimir effect at the end of the universe is the dark matter. And then, with the help of the heterotic theory of David Gross, the teacher of Frank Veliček, I could even discriminate a little bit more and don't say only dark energy, but pure dark energy and dark matter. Now, pure dark energy makes the world expand. It's a negative pressure, makes the world expand. And dark matter, no, it attracts. And dark matter have really an old history because there is a very stubborn Swiss guy, very famous astronomer, Fritz Zwicky. his colleague used to attack him enormously, and he attacks him back. I mean, he is really mountain Swiss, very difficult to discourage and extremely stubborn. He calculated the movement of many planets and finds there isn't enough matter to cause this movement. There have to be matter there which we don't see. So they attacked him, of course. Not through defamation in famous newspaper, no, but they attacked him. And he used to call his opponent, if I may say so, it's just so, spherical bastard. Because no matter how you look at them, they are bastards. So they are spherical. Fritz Zwicky predicted there must be something like that. Now we know. And more than that, someone whom I consider an absolute genius, but the people who were working with him, because he was working outside his specialty, think that he was singularly unsuccessful director of the Weizmann Institute of Science and Technology, one of the best institutes in the whole world, located in Israel. An Ukrainian mathematician. Actually, he worked mostly in probability theory, which is a very, very mathematical subject. Ernest Devroshky, from Ukraine originally, and he immigrated to Israel, and he became really the chief advisor of the army about armament. But he was a very peaceful man. And he found a fantastic theory, fantastic. For me, it was a solution of dark energy. As far as I'm concerned, who discovered dark energy theoretically is Devroshky. So nobody says that except me. Because he said any manifold which is 5-dimensional or more, most of the volume, in fact, 96% of the volume is not inside, but on the surface. That's it. In order to have energy, you have to have volume. And in fact, space-time, bending, and having anything, according to Einstein, it gives you force, so it's energy. So definitely, 96% of all energy, which we call dark energy, is at the surface of our universe, which means from where we stand here, it is at infinity. So put all this together now, from the theoretic point of view of David Gross, we can say easily that 20% at the end of the universe will be dark matter. And the other 74% or so is pure dark energy, expansive. But this dark matter will try to pull anything inside to come to it. Actually, this is the global Casimir effect. This is the effect, very relative, very, very close to Hawking radiation, to en-route temperature, to all this well-known effect locally. It's globally now. And really what they measured was a form of Casimir effect, as I mentioned. But really, you can. Anything which escapes from the gravitational force of whatever planet is there, for instance, in our case, our Earth, it will be pulled somewhere and have two destiny. Either to be sucked by another planet, another gravitational, or by luck, or navigating through all this trouble, can reach infinity, pulled by the 20% of all the energy density in the world, located at the end of the universe at infinity. But this is a hyperbolic infinity. The more you come near to it, you will find it went further still. in the back. So it's a real infinity. So now we can really say, in principle, this interstellar fuelless travel is possible. Actually, it's trivial. Like Archibald Wheeler said, how could we not have noticed it all the time when we have the theorem of Tofrovsky, which tell us, yes, of course, what else? And this paper really was published in a journal, which is an engineering journal. So I was happy as an engineer to send something engineering to the engineering, aerospace engineering journal. And it is located in one of the center of excellence of aerospace science in England. Yeah, with which we had a lot of cooperation long ago when I was still working only in engineering. So this is the history of this paper.
There's another paper here that looks quite similar. I mean, I can read the abstract, but it may be very similar. I don't see the date on it. A theoretical justification of NASA electromagnetic drive based on cosmic dark matter.
Yeah, I was attracted to this journal because it was called Innovation in Engineering and Science.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to be innovator and was hoping, but you are absolutely right. It's the content at the end is more or less the content of the paper you read to us. And the point is, now it is very difficult to get visibility because of the sheer number of publication venues. And okay, then there is a sort of democracy. Everybody can publish more or less. But then again, you have no authority with saying this is right and this is wrong without strangling you, because authority sometimes strangle. I mean, a very mild and intelligent man like Max Planck, that is really a mild, nice man. And they asked him, with respect to Einstein, with whom he had a lot of good relationship. Einstein was a revolutionary and renegade, more or less like me, or like you. And Max Planck was establishment. And then he said, I don't remember if he said it to Einstein or to everybody. And he said, when he was asked, when will the new idea, they meant something like Einstein, the new idea will be taken into science without 100 scientists against Einstein. And Einstein, of course, said, why 100? If I'm wrong, one is enough, but to show the strength. So he said, the only way new idea will come into science is when the people representing the old ideas die out.
Yeah.
He didn't say to get convinced. Yeah.
Well, and that, that goes further. That's the problem with paradigm change and Copernican revolutions and Thomas Kuhn in Structure of Scientific Revolution.
Yes.
He pointed out that same thing. And you get people who do what's called normal science. They pick the rug up, the anomalies or puzzles, they shove them underneath. And they say, well, this works. Classical physics works well enough, gets us to the moon. Well, we don't need to worry about it. But then the geniuses, like the Einsteins, the David Bohms, yourself, Kepler's, Plato, they take the anomalies and puzzles, stick them in the hopper, and then they contemplate, they cogitate, they actually move it over into the non-dominant hemisphere, and they ask the questions. And the anomalies give rise to these incredible deep insights. It's called abduction, retroduction. It's a form of reasoning that Charles Sanders Peirce actually saw in the writings of Aristotle, and that's what Plato did in the academy, is he would present the problems and puzzles and dead ends, the anomalies, and then the members of the academy would abduct the new solution. He did the same thing, by the way, with his writings. A lot of people think, dead ends, etc. But he was like the Timaeus that we're going to talk about in a little bit. In the Timaeus, he presents some very stunning puzzles. One where he doesn't describe the structure of the dodecahedron, and yet he says the dodecahedron is the key to the whole thing. Its mathematics is what guides everything else, and of course, it's all golden mean related. But there's one other paper here that two more papers that
I have
yes.
a more remark to say about that. Just to be fair also to everybody, some of these things is our own mistake. Sometimes we don't explain things right. Definitely, a lot of things I didn't explain it from the first go right. Took me a long time to get rid of my own prejudice and to understand what you say and other people say. For instance, in the case of this EM drive, no wonder there will be an opposition. Roger Shawyer and NASA, for the same purpose, trying to explain that by electromagnetism and explain that classically, of course you will have a backlash. And it is obvious to me now I solve the problem. The problem is very simple. We have a jet. What is a jet? An aeroplane taking us from Cairo to London. There's hot air coming from the machine and pushing. Mm-hmm. You are pushing against air. If you take the jet with a TWA or British Airways and you go into empty space, it will stop. You will have to have really all the time chemical coming out like in a rocket mm-hmm. to push you. Mm-hmm. Because it's fundamental to Newton. Action is equal reaction. Mm-hmm. So the people now said, you have a total vacuum and you're talking about an engine. What are you pushing against mm-hmm. so that you go forward? Mm-hmm. If there is nothing, and my answer is it is not nothing. It is the empty set. You push against the empty set, you go forward. But this is then not electromagnetism, and it is not maybe a little bit electromagnetism, but it is definitely not Newtonian. So when Roger Shawyer, in a very nice interview, he say it have nothing to do with quantum mechanics, it have nothing to do with all these sophisticated things. It's a normal motor. I'm sorry. You measured something right, your idea is right, but your explanation is not right. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And definitely, he is involved so deeply into that, but not with quantum mechanics and quantum fluctuation and Hawking mm-hmm. radiation, mm-hmm. which is esoteric for him as an engineer. Mm-hmm. Similar mistake I do myself without noticing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the definition of a mistake is something, nobody wants to make mistakes. A mistake is something which is wrong, you do, but you are not aware of. Mm-hmm. And this causes a backlash. We make it easy for people to attack paradigm shift because we are a bit sloppy. We make mistakes. Okay. So I just, mm-hmm. because I don't think there are people who are born to object against everything. We do provoke objection sometimes for not being careful enough.
Very good. Good point. Very good point.